Hello, everyone, and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Before we get into our second segment of the day, talking about the top point guards in fantasy basketball thus far this season, I do want to remind you to like, follow, and subscribe to the shows and the network if you haven't done so already. Keep up to date with me as I transition to the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, and also continue contributing and interacting with the shows a little bit more directly through the Super Chat, Super Thanks, and Super Stickers features here on YouTube. Also at our website, GSMCpodcast.net. You can leave a tip or donation or questions, comments, or concerns at both. It is greatly appreciated and makes our shows that much better here at the GSMC Sports Network. Without further ado, let us jump right into our second segment of the day, talking about the top point guards in fantasy basketball thus far, a little under the midway point of this season, getting ready for the All-Star game, which should be exciting. But let's talk about the point guard position, how it has changed and shifted in terms of the narrative surrounding it from a fantasy basketball perspective. In my mind, I remember when I was in high school, when I was playing fantasy basketball a little bit more often, and I saw a shift in the players I played with's mindset surrounding point guards. They were still heavily concerned about the position, but not necessarily to the point where they were really going all in as players who really were concerned about getting the position right. They felt that they could balance the position a little bit more, and they really saw the big man revolution. And I was one of the proponents of this big man revolution in my league, really hammering home guys like Jokic, guys like Davis, really stepping up their game and becoming the faces of fantasy basketball. But without further ado, though, let's talk about the point guard position, because it is still a vital position if you can get it right. And remember, the versatility of fantasy basketball allows you to kind of stretch things a little bit. You can put shooting guards and players who could be seen as small forwards at the point guard position. One guy who we're going to be talking about is Luka Doncic. He is indefinable in terms of what position he plays. So without further ado, let us jump right into this very versatile position of fantasy basketball. Starting off with Luka, who unfortunately right now is out with that calf strain. Could be another month until he gets it back, which is really unfortunate because now we know that Kyrie Irving's going to be out for at least 1 to 2 weeks. So we're really going to have to see the Mavs kind of do like what they did last year, rely on guys like their sixth man, Derek Lively, those guys to really step up in their absence and stay afloat in that play-in race. But Luka Doncic, when he was healthy, was one of the best point guards, if you view him that way, at least in the NBA. 28.1 points, 8.3 assists, 7.8 rebounds was his stat line, 56.2 fantasy points per game average. So as you can see, when he's healthy, truly one of the best point guards in the league. If you so choose to put him there, they play him there very often. He really is the facilitator of this offense. And once he gets going, some of the pick and roll game they play in that offense is beautiful to watch. I saw it in the finals against my Celtics. So we really know how special Luka Doncic is, but unfortunately he has to sit out for another month, kind of recuperating that calf strain, and unfortunately we can't necessarily use him in return for our fantasy basketball teams. But when he comes back, you better believe that a lot of people, if he's still out there on the waiver wire because someone dropped him due to injury, might be clamoring to pick him up. Now let's talk about a younger guy who is a true point guard in my regards, at least. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. This guy has been one of the best Thunder players of the past 2 years. Truly a fantastic facilitator of the basketball as well. 31.3 points, 6 assists, 5.5 rebounds, 53.4 fantasy points per game. I feel like this young man is going to be the face of this franchise for years to come. Yes, they have a lot of young players. Guys like Lou Dort, guys like Chet Holmgren, guys like Jalen Williams, all electrifying in their own right, all providing what this Thunder team really does best, playing solid offensively and playing very solid defensively as well with guys like Holmgren and Dort. But most importantly, on the offensive side of the basketball, it is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's poise and composure facilitating this offense that really stands out to a lot of fantasy basketball owners. And I feel like his star is going to continue to shine as the Thunder become a true championship contender, which they already are. But I really think that if we want to start calling them a dynasty after this year, should they get to the championship and win, SGA is going to have to be the face of this team, and he's handled it so far very well. And I feel like Thunder could transition into a team that's more offensive minded, that can really alleviate the burden on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but he's already doing a fantastic job, truly being the creator in this offense, the baser in this offense, and so on and so forth. Already have a lot of competitive wins against very good teams, much like the Celtics won last night. I believe they're playing the Thunder tomorrow. The Cavaliers tomorrow night. They are the Thunder. But ultimately, it should be an exciting affair with an exciting point guard leading the way for OKC for years to come. Now let's talk about a guy who's kind of headed in the opposite direction after a breakout season last year, Tyrese Haliburton. And I feel like the reason why he's been so frustrating is because the Pacers haven't used him as often. They really ran him into the ground in last year's playoffs, where he was seeing a high volume of minutes. And ultimately, I think that Rick Carlisle wants to slow down his usage rate a little bit, to the point where it's only a 20.6% usage rate for him. Thus, you see a decline in stats, only 17.6 points per game and 8.6 assists per game. So as you can see, a steady decline in a guy in Tyrese Haliburton who held a lot of promise after last season. And he still holds a lot of promise. The Pacers are firmly in the playoff picture. But I do feel like in order to get back to what they do best, you have to kind of be much like what Tom Thibodeau is with the Knicks. You kind of have to play your best players. Because, granted, the Pacers are a semi-deep team. They have enough experience to the point where they could be very competitive on any given night. But I just feel like you need that presence of Tyrese Haliburton. You need that pace. And yes, it runs the risk of injuries. It runs the risk of, showing your best hand too early, but ultimately Tyrese Haliburton is the key cog in this Pacers machine, and ultimately I feel like if his usage rate ups just a little bit, I feel like the Pacers could climb the standings over these next couple of months and become the team we knew them to be in last year's playoffs. And still, when you look at the depth of the Eastern Conference, I feel like you have teams that understand what it means to A, play as a team, but B, also trust their superstars. Cleveland and Boston have done that in spades, playing fantastic team basketball, but a team like New York that really relies on a lot of minutes for a lot of their stars could be the blueprint for the Pacers. And yes, it's a risky plan, like I said, but I do feel that Tyrese Haliburton is a worthy player of that superstardom and that level of play that he so deserves, and showed that he can be able to implement in his game going forward. So that's why I feel like Tyrese Haliburton is still someone you should invest in, and I still feel like he is someone who is going to have a bright second half of the season. Not to the point where, like last year, he truly was the superstar point guard we were all talking about very highly of, but still someone who you can rely upon in your fantasy basketball circle. And then last, but definitely not least, let's talk about the conundrum that is Stephen Curry, because he still is a fantastic player. And the Warriors are still a team that you never want to say die with, because they still have that mentality of we can get into the postseason, and if we do, anything can happen. But Steph has been someone who, as the years have gone on, has had to rely a little bit more on the depth of his team than a lot of other point guards, because his game slowly has become a little less important to the overall outlook of the Golden State Warriors, if that makes sense in my opinion. He still is one of the best three-point shooters in the game, and still one of the best three-point shooters of all time. But I do feel like there comes a time and place where it gets in the way of what the Warriors could be building here, because I feel that they've tried a little bit too much experimentation over the years, trying to get back to the championship formula, and it hasn't necessarily helped form a change within a player like Steph Curry, because he still is someone who is so reliant on that three-point shot, And thus, it's kind of a detriment to how I see the Warriors season playing out. He still averages 22.5, 6.5, and 4.8, but ultimately only 41.7 points per game, which is not as lofty as guys like the Lukas and SGAs of the world can put up. So you can say it's kind of a product of his environment, in that he's not playing in these teams that are as experienced as, say, Dallas, or a team that is as youthful and revolutionary as OKC, or a team that sets its pace like Indiana. But he still is Steph Curry, and you do expect him to play at a high level. It's just that this year, this Warriors team, to me, yes, lost Klay Thompson, but ultimately has lost its luster more so than any one player that could be helping them right now. And so that's why I ultimately see Steph Curry as a valuable asset in fantasy, but not more than, say, a big role player, because Luka and SGA are revolutionizing the position now. And Steph Curry feels like he's being a little bit left in the past. And this is no indictment of what he's done throughout his career, but I feel like that's the situation the Warriors and Stephen Curry are facing right now. But overall, a very interesting way to analyze and diagnose certain aspects of the point guard position is by looking at this top four, just because of the versatility of what a player like Luka brings to the table, combined with a guy in Steph Curry who is slowly going to have to shift his mindset if he wants to continue in this league to the point where he himself can progress with the times. And that's where I kind of feel like this shift in the narrative of the point guard position from a fantasy perspective could come into play, because you now have to view it in a much drastically different light than you did in recent years. But let me know what you think about the position in the comments below. But coming next, we talk about the shooting guard position. Definitely a position that's more of like a depth position, not necessarily the most fun position to talk about, but it's still one that adds a lot of value. So we'll be right back after this short break to talk about it.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for